The two major data types that we use with numbers in C++ are the data types int and double. And I hinted at those in the last lesson, but let's take a little more look at those. Int are whole numbers. Whoops, not whole numbers. Whole numbers. And double are floating point numbers. Whoops. So let's take a look at examples of what those are. So 23 is an example of an integer value. That's a whole number. 20,000 is another example of a whole number. Example of a floating point number, we did this one in the last lesson. Pi is an example of a floating point number, and it's also a double. Another example is 2.25. There's another example of a double. You can combine those. Whoops. I'm in trouble today. You can combine floating points and integers. So I can say 1 plus 0.05, and watch what I get. 1.05, just as you expected. But you have to be careful. When we get to variables and storing data in variables, then it's going to make a difference what the variable type is, because the numbers do not necessarily go together, especially when they're stored in variables. And we'll talk more about that in another lesson. But the idea here is to recognize that there are two major numeric data types that we use in C++ all the time. Integer values, or int values, which are simply whole numbers, and doubles, which are floating point values. And as long as you keep that straight, you'll start out fine. Now what happens is that when we talk about them not mixing, it turns out that we can't store floating point values in integer variables. But again, I'm getting ahead of the game on that. We'll talk about that more later. So to wrap up this very short lesson, just understand that there are two major data types in C++ that we use to store numbers. Int for whole numbers and double for floating point numbers. Recognizing that there are many, many other data types, but right now there's no sense in getting confused with long int or long or short int or float versus double. For now, just recognize that if you need to store an integer value or a whole number, you use the int type. If you need to store a floating point value, you use the double type, and then you'll be just fine.